many of you will remember, just before Sony Pictures pulled the plug on their planned shared Spider-Man cinematic universe, writer Drew Goddard was pegged to both write and direct a Sinister Six movie that much of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 seemed to be setting up. Those plans went up in smoke when Sony announced they were once again rebooting the franchise and had come to a deal with Marvel that would see Spider-Man appear in various Marvel films and also Sony to utilize some Marvel characters in their standalone Spider-Man films. However, it seems that there may still be hope for Goddard's Sinister Six. In a recent interview with IO9, the Martian screenwriter claimed the movie may still be possible when he said the following: "My vision of that movie was a summer annual, so you didn't have to worry about continuity. It was just, we take Peter, put him on an adventure, we put him back in his life. I intentionally wanted a movie that didn't have to worry about mythology and continuity. It was important to me to make a movie that could stand on its own." So the good news is, while he laughed, it slots in very well to any plan anybody ever wants. We just need to let a couple years go by, I think. Schnepp, what do you think of Goddard's comments, and do you think we could ever see his Sinister Six movie on the big screen?
First of all, I want to know how did Ray put that together?
I think he did, yeah.
It's really cool. I want a picture. First of all, he looks like a badass supervillain himself. So he got like supervillain photography, and now he's got all the villains hanging out. The lizard.
He's got his claw on his shoulder.
Really good promotional photo, Drew
I have
Goddard.
good news. I actually have tickets to see Drew Goddard's magic show in print.
I know, right?
Next week.
Watch him pull 6 Sinister Six out of 4 hats. How did he do that? I don't think this script is ever going to happen. So I think it's one of those things where maybe they might use the shell of it, but he was writing it so that it fits into the continuity of the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 and how the Rhino and how all of Oscorp created all these villains. I don't necessarily think that the Marvel Spider-Man is going to go with that same route, using the same Oscorp tower with the same origins for all those villains. So with that being said, I don't know if they would use any of the skeleton of what he's done. He's an amazing writer, so you'd probably not want to throw everything away. And it would suck that he wasted almost a year and a half of his life working on this thing. So I would hope that there's something there that's usable, but I kind of feel like they would probably not do a Sinister Six movie for, like he even said, several years.
Don't worry about him wasting a year and a half.
Know, right?
Like he got paid big money for that year and a half. For those of you who don't know what he's talking about, when he says summer annual, what do they mean when he says summer annual?
He means, like, in comic book terms, every year they do 12 issues, and then there would be like a big annual is what they'd call. Once a year they do an individual, like 64-page standalone special. Like if it was Spider-Man, it'd be like Spider-Man in Antarctica finds Bigfoot or something. It would have nothing to do with the regular comic book series. So he's using comic book terminology when he says
So he's basically saying a standalone film that would be isolated from anything else. You know what? I could totally see this. I like the feeling that, because when you think about the relationship, first of all, he said something else interesting in that interview, because there was talk before when they were going to do that Sinister Six movie that, hey, we don't even know if Spider-Man is going to be in it. And saying, we're all like, really? Like all the villains? But Goddard kind of clarified that. He said, no, that was going to be a Spider-Man movie. Make no mistake about it. So that's interesting to hear. But understanding the relationship now between Sony and Marvel, like, yeah, Marvel's allowed to use Spider-Man in it, but Sony is still doing all their standalones. This fits in that model. If Sony wanted to do, I'm sure they wouldn't do it for their first Spider-Man film, but if they wanted to do a self-contained, isolated Spider-Man kind of annual, and then let Peter get back to his regular life after that, I kind of feel like what Goddard's talking about here would oddly fit into that whole new paradigm they've set up between Sony and Marvel, and maybe work really well. However, I have to agree with you. I don't actually think it's going to happen. That seems a little bit too ambitious. We're talking about a Spider-Man now who is being rebooted, and while we're not going into an origin story again, and while we are assuming he's been around New York for a while doing his heroic stuff, we've never been introduced to any of these 6 characters. So you're talking multiple standalone films down the line. It's just a little bit too far off for me to seem realistic. So I got to agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen, but it does sound intriguing. Mark, what do you think?
We're not sure how ambitious this is yet, because like Goddard said, my takeaway is that we got to wait a couple of years before we even think about this. It is an interesting premise, though, when you think about how every comic book film seems to need to tie into the larger universe now. It's very rare to see anything that's standalone, and fans might, in the couple of years, we might get a little tired of the fact that everything has to tie into this large universe. We have to make everything fit. It would be interesting to see somebody take a different approach.
Yeah,
maybe
true.
Sony is the studio to do that. They were really pushing Sinister Six before all those email leaks and Spider-Man kind of went to crap over there. That seemed to be the storyline that they really were excited about. If they were that excited about it once, they could get that pumped about it again. But I think you do have to wait a couple of years to see what Spider-Man's involvement in the MCU is, and if that's going to be too complicated, or if Marvel doesn't want Spider-Man to be in a standalone summer annual kind of thing. Because even though the property is at Sony, I think Marvel's going to have a lot to say about what those storylines involve.
You know, to support what you're saying, because I think you raised an excellent point. In that same article, there was some concern raised that, and you never had to worry about this before, but one of the big problems with pulling together that summer annual kind of thing is having to adequately explain why didn't 40 other superheroes show up to help Spider-Man?
Right.
Why didn't Iron Man come in? Why didn't Captain America come help? Why didn't Thor come help? Why didn't Black Widow come help? Blah, blah, blah. And suddenly now that becomes a story problem. Well, now we got to think of a reason why everybody's busy to do our standalone movies. That is one of the unfortunate thing about these shared cinematic universes we're all creating.
Well, the one thing that my takeaway is we have to rewrite Aunt May now. I mean, totally almost done, almost ready to start shooting, guys.
We're in the second draft.
Yeah, totally have to start all over. Thanks a lot, Goddard.
Now, of course, your Aunt May script was primarily just Sinead DeFries drinking latte.
Yes,
for like 2 hours.
But that took hundreds of hours to write and think about and ponder. And now Marissa Tomei is going to be playing Sinead.
That's right. That leather jacket has web shooters, by the way. I've seen them.